Hello, welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. You are listening to the goingboldmedia.com. I hope you guys will check that out. All of our wonderful guests and hosts are there. But today we're doing what we always do on our shows. We actually are going bold with the experts on Link to Expert Business Showcase. I am just one of your hosts here today. I am Cece Shatz. I'm the Doyenne of Relationship Building. And I have my good friend here with me, Joanne Weiland. Joanne, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Joanne Weiland, Weiland when you can fly, with the founder of Link to Experts, so you can find an expert fast and easy, as well as be found as an expert in minutes. So we welcome you to the show today. We're excited to have one of our actual Link to Expert members on, Ron Laker. And so when you're ready, Cece, we can bring Ron up and welcome to the show.
Most certainly. I tell you, Ron, you are just a man of many hats, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I've tried on a few.
And I feel so blessed today to be with both of you. I've known both of you for many years, but you're two of the pioneers in the TV hosting and TV producing. And it's really exciting that we can share this because of the fact that some people nowadays might think it's common, but you both started way before it was cool, or way before it was even mostly known. So I really feel excited about, the next 40 minutes together, that we can share some of our ideas. And Ron, I know you have an extensive bio and people can read it online, but I just thought we'd start from the, if you will, way back when you had this idea and put it on, I call it a napkin. I think you called it a placemat, because of the fact that I think that's where everything starts, is with the creativity of allowing your mind to open up and come up with new ideas, and how you evolved that into such an amazing recycling business. And I'm a big recycler. My grandson even says that, Yaya, you would even recycle a straw paper. I really do believe that. And plus, I grew up actually in two different, what we used to call junkyards. Now they call them, recycling.
Yeah, it's become popular in vogue. It's metals recycling.
Right. So if you don't mind, I thought we could start with, how you, evolved and grew into coming up with this incredible idea that was so fruitful.
Sure. I work for a company called the David Joseph Company, which is a very old, established, probably one of the nation's oldest and most respected scrap metal recyclers and brokerage firms. And I worked for them for a total of 32 years. And about midway through my career, I was living in Tampa, Florida, which is still my home. And I was kind of at the peak of a certain part of my career, but at the ebb of my life. My life was really kind of at a low point. And, personally, I knew I was headed towards a divorce. My two sons, who I adore, had moved on and gone to college. And I was probably in that stage, maybe kind of mid to late 40s, and really kind of what was next, and what do I do next, and how do I, produce? How do I add value? What is it that I'm going to do with the next phase of my life? So I was coming back from sales calls one day, and I stopped at a restaurant called the Red Barn Restaurant over in Polk County. It has since burned down, but they had great steaks and great beer. And I went in there kind of actually not really wanting to head home. And so I stopped in there for dinner, and I was in the back bar. There was a big restaurant, big bar, small bar, and a bar in the back. And I was sitting in the back bar, literally by myself at a table, drinking some beers and ordered a steak. And they had these diner placemats that were sitting in front of me. And it was the map of Florida. I actually have the original one here with me, believe it or not, when you told me we were going to talk about it. So I dug it up, and I'll share it in a minute. So we were sitting there, and I was drinking a couple of beers, and I was doodling on this diner placemat. And at that time, we had 3 very well managed scrap operations in Florida, but they were not full service. They were just doing a very specific thing for a very specific consumer. So I pulled this map out and I started doodling on it. I says, what if we could consolidate the industry in Florida? And what if we could overcome any obstacles that we were met along the road? And what would that look like? And more importantly, why would I even want to do this? So I started putzing around. And after about 20 minutes, my steak came. I'm doodling on this napkin. And all of a sudden, I just started channeling what turned out to be a 3-hour solo think session about the creation of trademark metals recycling. And I had diner placemats and notes scribbled everywhere, tacked up on the wall, taped on the wall. And I did the most logical thing I could think of at the time. And that was stop drinking beer and drinking vodka and really getting after it. So 3 hours later,
Good idea.
3 hours later, I had a whole stack of papers that I put together. The next day I go into my office. I asked my secretary at the time, I said, would you type this up and make it somewhat readable so that we can do something with it? And 3 weeks later, we came up with the essence of a business plan, which we presented to the management of the David Joseph Company. And within about 6 months, they came back to me much shorter than that. Said, do you really think you can do this? And I said, yeah, I think we can pull this off, and we can pull it off right now. It's the right time, right market, whatever. So fast forward from that doodle on the placemat, which is, here is the original placemat, believe it or not, and the doodle with it. And there were a couple of key factors about scrap metal in the state of Florida. You know, scrap metal is generated by people, and about 90% of the people in Florida lived along the coast, and highways ran along those population corridors. So it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize that if we placed the location strategically, kind of in a triangular fashion, that we would be able to control the scrap material within that geographical area. And every point led to another point that led to another point that led to another point on another triangle. So the entire state was broken down these little triangles. And if you look at it closely, you'll see that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And so 12 years later, that idea that was doodled on the placemat grew to 20 locations. A full service scrap metal recycling company that generated over $700 million in revenue, and we had 700 employees. So
Wow.
it was a marvelous journey that I got to enjoy.
No, that's incredible. I mean, to not just have the dream, but take the dream and, you know, expand the dream and just think about it, 700 people, just as the employees, lives better. And I know you always had the saying that, you know, that you all help each other. And that, I think, was the key to the growth, don't you?
Well, you know, I was not prepared to kind of lead or manage a company of this magnitude at the time. I had to grow into that position. And there were a lot of lessons that I learned about growing into that position. And we had a group of managers that in their own right were entrepreneurs, that we acquired a bunch of companies, and those companies had managers, and we kept retaining those managers. And buying these companies was the easy thing, but developing a cohesive culture was the challenge, with 12 type A individuals that were general manager of our facilities. Well, I had this vision of all for one and one for all. And I likened my managers at the time to a pack of wolves. And what made the wolf strong was the pack. And what made the pack strong was the wolf. So, you know, it was pretty clear that I was going to be the alpha wolf of that pack. And when we decided on a target, we all discussed it and we all shared our ideas and views. But once we made a decision, we knew exactly which deer we were going to chase and how we were going to approach it. And we all profited together. So the day I realized that I was going to be the visionary leader of this company and not necessarily the smartest guy in the room, we certainly flourished. And so that all for one and one for all philosophy really was what kind of brought us together. And it was a great story on developing corporate culture.
Well, it really is. And I do believe you have to actually have the dream that's bigger than you are at the time. But like you said, you grow into it. I really do believe that, because if you only think of what you already know, you're not going to evolve and grow, or evolve and grow your company in this case. So I personally think that that's so important, because I know people have told me over and over that I'm so ahead of my time. Some people think 8 years, 10 years, whatever. I don't really think you are. I think that you just have a vision, and you need to know that you don't know, and it'd be okay with not knowing, but knowing you will know when you need to know. And it's just interesting. Then, see, I never had the dynamic like you did, though, of having to then have all the wolves, competing in the way you did, because you really did have the idea and you did need to lead. And when they were strong, I'm sure it wasn't always easy getting them to understand that we are all in this together, because sometimes, when they're used to being the leader of the pack, like you called it, they're kind of set in their ways that way.
Well, we had a really interesting segment about 3 years after we started this company, which was started in the late 1990s. In 2001, we went into a recession, and the recession was really horrible in our industry. And a lot of our growth actually happened during that recession. My parent company had a lot of money, they had a lot of experience, and we were never going to let a recession, miss an opportunity because of recession. So we were actually able to grow our company, and we really didn't lay off that many people. We didn't hire anybody, but after that period of time, we did a survey of our employees, and we had about 350 employees at that time, maybe 370 employees at that time. And so we did the survey, and the survey came back. I think we did okay. We just survived. We survived. We had made money. Everybody had their jobs, and we thought we were okay. And some of the points that came back on that survey almost made me nauseous. It said, that this is a dangerous place to work. They haven't had a raise in 3 years. If I hear from my manager one more time, it's my way or the highway. I'm going to quit. And my personal favorite was, supervisors are sleeping with the secretaries and nobody's doing anything about it. So, I was absolutely blown away by this, and it really affected me deeply. So I went to our vice president of operations at the time and our HR director, and we went and visited all 350 employees one-on-one or one-on-5 or one-on-10. And we met with them over about a 4-month period of time. And some of the places, like in South Florida, we had an interpreter because we had many bilingual employees. And so the all of that was, after a breakthrough with some of these people, we all agreed to get the idea of all for one and one for all out of my head, out of our manager's head, down to the shop floor. And so we started getting input from bottoms up from our hourly employees. So I remember very vividly sitting in Cocoa Beach at a company dining hall that was really kind of a nasty place at the time, thinking, okay, I can do so much. I need your help. You have to help me help you help ourselves, and we'll come up with a plan. So we came up with a safety plan. We came up with a production plan, and we all worked together. So everybody had ownership on it. Mm-hmm. And 3 years later, from that first survey, we had a 47% employee approval rating. And by the time 3 years later, we had a 97% employee approval rating. And that was really the success of TMR. It was just, we had this all for one and one for all philosophy. And it was just a great experience to watch that transformation. And I too had to transform and had to become a different person to be successful in that role.
Well, especially when you had to merge and grow the acquisitions with other people. Did you find that some of the people in the other companies, in the other acquisitions, that already had those skills, or did you find outside consultants, or how did you, be able to?
Like I said, the managers that we had were all brilliant people. I mean, they were all, 5 of them have gone on to be different presidents of different organizations. The parent company had a lot of talent that I could tap into. A lot of it, believe it or not, just happened to come simultaneously for me. And I've never really said this publicly before. I was coaching a high school basketball team, 15 and 15-year-old kids at the time. And my whole thing was to give them life lessons and motivate them to be better human beings, not necessarily just be better basketball players. And I realized many of the lessons that I was sharing to a 15-year-old guy applied to a 45-year-old man, and vice
Right.
versa. And I learned every day from those kids, and I learned every day from the managers who work for our company. And at that time, I was doing a lot of growth and development, personal development on myself too, through landmark education, a couple of peak potentials. So I was getting advice and ideas from a lot of different sources, and I applied them, which later became known as emotional intelligence, but it basically was just basic common sense.
Right.
Mhm. I was going to say too is that it's remarkable because you don't really hear that often, where you get a big, pretty good sized corporation from the head going down all the way and talking to each person to be able to try to figure out what the problem is here. And then how to address it. You don't hear that very often. And so kudos to you for doing that and taking the time, and I think it really made your business much stronger by doing that. So
Cece, I'm going to share this one quick story. When we first walked into that very first meeting in Cocoa Beach, there were 30 people in the room, and not one of them would open up. Not one of them would say anything. And I remember peering into that door when I opened that door, and I was the last one of 3 people to walk in. And I thought of my father. My father worked for 62 years at a factory, never had more than an 8th grade education, never missed more than 2 days of work in his entire life. And my dad would always ask me, he says, do you have enough work? Do you have enough work? Because he was a child of the Depression. And so it really dramatically affected his life. And he was always lived in a state of fear and scarcity, always thinking there was never going to be enough work. He'd lose his job if he didn't perform at a high level. And this fear that, you'd see in his eyes. And I remember that at one time, when I opened that door, I saw the same fear in all 30 people sitting in that room.
Wow.
I immediately identified, not with me at the role of being the president of that company at the time, but I identified as being a child of one of those people. And it changed my whole demeanor when we went in there and had the conversation. And that's what started the opportunity for us to really work well together.
That's terrific. Yeah, because not many people do that. They don't realize, they don't take it down to that level of being human, and really understanding that, which, by doing that, your company flourished. So that's a great thing. So it's wonderful. I'm wondering if we should just take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about some of your other adventures, because our show today is really business life to the life you love. And Ron Laker, you've definitely done this. I mean, here we'll talk a little bit more about, when we come back, some of the other business ventures that you've had, and you've had many. That's why I said a man with many hats, but a big heart, because you share a lot with people. And then moving on through to where you are now, and really enjoying your life and doing what you want to do. So we'll talk about that when we come back. But you guys are listening to Link to Expert Business Showcase. I am Cece Shatz. I have my good friend here, Joanne Weiland, here with me. We have our guest, Ron Laker, here with us, and we want to thank him so much for being here with us today. But we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact GoingSoloDirectory.com.
Welcome back to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is a Link to Expert Business Showcase. I am Cece Shatz. I'm one of your hosts here today, and I have my good friend here, Joanne Weiland, and we're talking with Ron Laker. Ron Laker, who, Joanne and I both know him. He's from our local area. We're from the Tampa Bay area, and it's really a great town. If you guys haven't heard of it, it's a city, and right there by the beaches, and it is super nice to be able to have one of our locals here with us. So we do appreciate it. But Ron, you've done a lot of things. The first part of the show, we talked about, being in business where you were, in business for quite some time as a president of an organization and really grew that to be a tremendous business. But then you ventured into some other businesses. So kind of share that with us. And I know that you also dabbled in some art and some of the paintings behind you. Are they yours or no?
Yeah, they are mine.
Fantastic artists, I must tell you.
Thank you.
I mean, they're blowing me away. They are beautiful, beautiful pictures. And so I remember seeing some of those come across Facebook because we're friends on Facebook. So I've seen some of those things. So kind of tell us a little bit about why you've moved into some of the other things that you kind of ventured in and, that type of thing.
Well, I'll lay a platform first before we get into some of those specifics. Back in 2005 or 2006, I was on vacation. I was on vacation in Italy with the girl that I was dating at the time, who was doing a landmark education course. And I went over there, but I was not part of the course, but I would involve myself at their dinners and such. So anyway, one day I was sitting by the pool, and this was TMR had been maybe 10 years old by this time, maybe. And I was laying by the pool and I started to kind of journal in this journal about what I liked about my life and what I didn't like about my life and what I wanted to change and how I wanted to live that life. So I started eliminating things that I didn't like. And the first thing I didn't like was I didn't like the hot weather of Tampa, Florida in the summertime. I loved the winter, but I hated the summer and I wanted to travel. I had never had the opportunity to travel like I wanted to. And I wanted to explore and experience new and different things. And I wanted to completely challenge myself and totally get out of my comfort zone in a few different areas of life that I just didn't want to stay in that one lane. And it's not the best way to be successful, but it was a great way for me to be successful by my definition. So when in 2008, we get a phone call from, our board, our group out of Cincinnati, if you will, and they tell me that they're going to sell the company. I said, okay. So I literally received that phone call as I was at a conference in New Jersey called Never Work Again. And it was about how to create the life with passive income and passive life and that sort of stuff so that you can go do exactly what you want to do. So this has been a theme in my life for a long time. So they sold the company in 2008. I agreed to stay on in my own mind to be its president and CEO for another year until 2009. In 2009, I was going to leave. And this was after a 32-year career in that industry. It was time to do something different. Challenge was I was still very young and I really wasn't ready to completely go retire for a lot of reasons. One, I didn't have the resources at the time. I didn't have the competence to go do this at the time. I didn't, what do you do? Everybody asks you, what are you doing now? And it's like, okay, I wasn't ready to be retired fully. So I got involved with a couple of guys and we started what was called Next Century Studios. And this was NCS TV, was a precursor to what is this show, if you will. We were doing subject matter expert programming in 2009, 2010. And we produced about 18 different shows. We had different people who had different expertise, and we created a show around them. So that was fun. We created an entire model of distribution. We created an entire model of formatting, and we really were the kind of the precursors to a lot of this. And one of the funny things that I will say about that, we used to strip the audio out of it and we'd give it to you as a podcast. This was before podcasting was even a thing. Okay. Well, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Chris Kermitzo's Podcast Fest in Orlando.
Yep, we
probably start to explore that maybe myself. So anyway, so we started NCS-DB, and at that time, I actually was a host for my own show, which was called Everyday Success TV, and I would interview, business people similar to the format of your show, and we had a lot of fun, met a lot of people, and really enjoyed that. However, I enjoyed being on the camera, and I enjoyed doing the research and doing the work and that sort of thing. But there was something I wanted to do differently, and I wasn't really wired into that as a business I wanted to do. So we merged that company into a company that later became a kind of advertising company, and that company then started shooting promotional videos and work and that sort of product. We did that for a few years. I was involved in that, and then we spun around that a few different ways, and we turned the wheel this way and we turned the wheel that way, and it was a fascinating experience. I learned an awful lot, and I really challenged myself because I remember when I left the scrap metal industry, I couldn't even spell www. And then the first book I got after I left TMR was what would Google do? This was right after, Google bought YouTube, and we were trying to figure that whole platform out. So it was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, I remember you doing that. I remember because I was like back in that time, I was still doing the podcast. I was on the radio, more of the radio, and then getting into the other. And so, so then podcasts formed, and then we kind of blossomed into that. But here's what I'm hearing, as I'm talking to you, and I know you, so I know that you're not afraid of movement. You're right. And so often, people that are maybe even in our age group, they're afraid of technology. They're afraid of things changing. They want things to stay the same, but you're excited about the change. You're like, oh yeah, hallelujah, something new is coming, and let's investigate that. Let's see if it's going to be something that, that I want to venture into, or I want to bring on board, or I want to do something different. So you're never afraid of change. You're never afraid of doing a pivot or swivel or sidestep into something, which is, is really great for you. It's just refreshing to hear.
Well, I remember going to visit Ron one time at his NCS studio, and he was in front of the green screen and doing, shooting his show. And that was my first experience with the green screen. And, it seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't. But I was just like, wow, this is how they do it. I can still remember, then you explaining more of it to me. And so you definitely are. Well, I thought of when you had that fire down at the port. And they called it the fearless scrap metal volcano. And, Ron just calmly commented on it. Well, it was just like, whoa. So, yes, Cece, you're absolutely right. He's fearless.
Yeah, we had, I'll tell you, Cece, this is kind of an interesting thing. I've never let what I do for a living ever define who I am. And I got that lesson when I was in college. I was on a basketball team in college, and I was playing at Xavier University at the time. And my career got cut short midway through my senior year. And it was brought on about some disciplinary actions and a few things that I had made determination at that time. And anyway, the coach and we decided to part ways. All right. So up until that time in my life, basketball was part of my identity. Ever since I was 5 or 6 years old, I had been a basketball player, and it was a ticket for me to get to college. I knew a lot of people because of it. It gave me a lot of, quote, note in the community. And my identity was basketball. And all of a sudden at 21 years of age, midway through my senior year of college, that identity was taken away from me. And I remember at that time being emotionally just distraught over it. I was crying, and I was sitting out, at Christmas time during my senior year. And I will never, ever let my identity be defined by what I do. And I came up with that time. Okay. Later, I kept toying around with this. So to address your reason why I don't fear change at all is I define myself not by what I do, but by who I am. And it was always came back to the same 5 or 6 characteristics. I'm kind, I'm curious, I'm inquisitive, I'm creative. I love new experiences. I love to travel. and I express those experiences through travel, and I deliver those experiences through telling stories in my art. So if you are that person, that opens up a lot of doors for you. And once you realize those doors can take you down a whole new path, it doesn't matter if it's a new career or not, those same characteristics will see me through. And everybody has those same characteristics. I always get a kick out of when I meet somebody and they say, oh, what, and tell me about yourself. And they start out with, I'm a lawyer or I'm a doctor. I said, no, that's not who you are. That's what you do because you've got skills that you've developed that align with that career choice, but that is not who you are. Right. So I think I'm that guy. Throw me anywhere, I'll probably learn to swim. So
yeah, and I like what you said at the beginning of the show when you were talking about coming up with your plan, right? On the placemat, is that you were channeling. And I think so often we all have that ability to like channel, or we have this knowing of something that maybe we want to do or whatever. And we don't take the, we let fear or whatever or change get in the way of that. And you didn't do that. You realized that something that was coming in, something was channeling for you. And I remember doing it the same thing with what I'm doing now. Is like everybody told me don't do it, but I had this knowing that I need to do this. This is what I need to do, and come hell or high water, I was going to do it. And I think it's kind of how it happened to you. Like you had this channeling, you had this knowing of something you needed to do. You started laying it all out. And then when, you typed it all up and you could see that you have a business there and all of that. And then you fearlessly went forward into it. And I think often we have to do that when we have this, and I think, Joanne, you've done the same thing with Link to Experts. I think we all have this ability to have something come to us, but sometimes we'll block it or fear will get in the way. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that because I think that's important in business, because often we have that knowing of what we need to do. Like I remember the first doing the shows, and I was offered to go on like the TV and do the TV and do all of that. And I did that a little bit, but then I kept thinking to myself, no, I think internet is the way to go. We are all going to be eventually full blown into internet. And people laughed at me back then. And now look at us. I mean, there isn't anything that's not on internet.
Mm-hmm. So I remember, prior to that channeling, mm-hmm. Making the statement, what would this look like if I can overcome any obstacle that's thrown in our way? Mm-hmm. And once you kind of take, every light is a green light, then you just start writing. You don't get hung up with, oh, well, what happens if there's legal issues? What happens if there's environmental issues? What happens if we can't find the employees? You'll solve that problem when it presents itself. And I think that kind of opens the opportunity up for anybody to channel.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a great message to share with people, because when they're looking at business or having their own business, a lot of times they're afraid to even begin. And so I think that, if you know it in your heart, you know it in your gut, you got something there, you just need to, like you said, write it down and put it on paper. Sometimes when you put pen to paper and you look at it, it's amazing what you do have.
And then when you share too, like Ron has 68 different blogs on Link to Expert, just as an example. And like one of the favorite that people still keep reading is Use Your Newness. And it's a lot about what you guys are talking about. You don't have to feel like you know everything. You can be okay with telling somebody, I'm new at this. Can you help me? And they're more than willing to, versus acting like you know it all.
Oh, so, totally.
It's really amazing how, just being open and upfront, like you're both talking about. I mean, I always say, I know, the more I know, the more I know I don't know, the more I want to know, because it really is interesting. But I also feel like, when you're adventurers like us three, you have to live like that, because I couldn't imagine always knowing what my day was going to be by going to the same place and doing the same thing. And I'm not knocking people that do it. Thank God we have them. But, when you're different like us, I don't know what you want to call it, crazy, you know, it would be impossible. So I totally agree with both of you.
I always say I know enough to be dangerous. Not
Yeah,
enough to get myself out of trouble.
you asked me, and in respect of the time here, you
Yes.
kind of asked me about a little bit about,
Mhm.
leaning into the life that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to that 732 plan that I wrote, I was going to live in Tampa 7
Mhm.
months, travel 3 months, live someplace, and then travel in the spring and fall, September and October, where it's spring or fall anywhere in the world, uh, everywhere in the world or somewhere in the world. That is kind of what I'm leaning into. After we did those businesses, and I got involved with a company, and I was their senior executive director for this internet-based reputation management company. It's a very good company called Ranko.
Right. Yes.
And I absolutely loved my involvement there. But when COVID rolled around, I decided that I was going to use that as the opportunity to go do something that I've been talking about for a long time, and that was to travel this 732 lifestyle. So I had several speaking engagements lined up. I was involved in 2 different businesses at the time. I called everybody and I said, look, I said, I'm out. I said, cancel the speaking engagements. And if you guys make a lot of money, send me a check. If you don't make any money, call me. Maybe I'll give you some advice sometime. And COVID rolled around, and it was March 18th, and I was supposed to speak that night, and we canceled it. It was the day after St. Patrick's Day, and I didn't want 200 people in a room, and I was going to get sick or give them sick. So I packed up my bike, my car with my bicycle, canvases, paints, books, every CD I've ever owned, my fly rods, and a chair. I put that in my car, and it sat in my car for 2 nights, and I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to the bathroom. I hopped in my car, and I came back 7 months, 21,000 miles later. I went on a 7-month solo road trip at the initial stages of COVID. So I had a marvelous experience, made the most out of a bad situation. That then, when I got back from that trip, I left in March, and I came back in November. Since that time, every year I kind of take off in May and I escape the heat and I pick someplace else in the world to go explore. So to your point about doing something different every day, I know I'm going to be traveling, but I'm not so sure where I'm going to be in 3 days from now. I meet people along the way and they tell me about interesting places, and usually a few days later, I figure out the bus or the train schedule, and I get myself to a city that I didn't know existed 3 days earlier. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. So this next year, I'm going to spend May. I'm going out to Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Northern California. And then from there, I plan on coming back to Tampa, repacking my suitcase, and then I'm going to South America for the summer, which would be their winter, but it'll be our summer.
That sounds great. I'm surprised you're not doing an RV type of travel. Have you tried that?
No, I haven't. When I took my car, I wound up staying in Airbnbs and hotels at the time. So no, I'm not I don't think that's it's a romantic thought to do. I just don't see me doing it. Okay.
Cece used to sell RVs. I mean, she's
is
done
that right?
everything
There you
too.
go. I used to sell RVs. Can you believe that? Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's I grew up in camping world. My dad owned a camper business. So we grew up doing that type of thing. And so, yeah, it's a great way to see the U.S.,
It is. Yeah.
I will say it is a great way to see the U.S. And I'm so pleased that you're doing that. You're able to live the life you want. And that's what our show is about, is like, the business life. You take care of business on hand, and then hopefully the latter part of your life, you can live the life you love. And so, you're doing it, and that's
the key is trying to figure out how to integrate those two at the same time. Okay, which certainly can be done. All right.
I know I struggle with that myself, but yeah.
But Ron's living proof of it can be done, and we appreciate you sharing all this with us, because I really do think a lot of people don't believe it's possible. So it's really good to give them an example, and you're living proof.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And you're still doing stuff. You're still doing business stuff. Like you said, you're looking at now, if you're going to be doing a podcast or something, you've got to definitely come on our station because we would love to have you.
Actually, I'm germinating an idea to do a TV show, an internet-based TV show, but it's a very specific audience, and I know it's right in my wheelhouse. So I'm going to Podfest with the intention of trying to assemble a team of people who can assist in doing what I envision. So
Yeah, you should do that. I mean, we're on Roku, just Roku alone.
Yeah.
I checked the stats yesterday. We're 6 million.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So thank you, Roku and Amazon TV. We appreciate you. We love you. Thank you for listening to us. So yeah, we're at 6 million. And so,
Congratulations.
they're looking for good quality shows. And, we're just thankful to be out there and them listening. So yeah, if you feel like you got to do it.
Apple TV and YouTube too. I mean, we're on other TV networks.
I didn't even count those. I mean, I haven't even counted our stats on that. I mean, we're on like 50 some different platforms. And so, yeah, so we have a lot, but yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that you need to live the life you want. And, if you feel like it, you need to go with it. So yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to close out the show. It's going fast. Or any last words you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I think just stay present. Do that little exercise. Figure out who you are. Identify yourself by your characteristics of what makes you unique, and then see if that definition of yourself aligns with what you're doing in life and what you want to be doing in life. And if it is, then you'll be a happy person no matter what it is you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we love you. We want to thank you so much for you being on the show here with us today. It is super nice to have you. You guys are listening to Link to Expert Business Showcase. I am Cece Shatz. I have my good friend here, Joanne Weiland, with us. Just remember, we're on Going Bold Media, goingboldmedia.com. You can find all of our wonderful shows and hosts right there. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you.